Today's guest is Bronwyn Coles. Bronwyn Coles is a transformational coach, intuitive healer, and energy alchemist devoted to empowering CEOs, entrepreneurs, visionary leaders, and youth trailblazers to unlock their full potential and thrive in the face of adversity. With over 30 years of experience, Bronwyn has cultivated a unique, deeply impactful approach that blends energy work, mindfulness practices, and practical tools to ignite personal transformation and create lasting success. Her mission is to guide individuals to reconnect with their authentic selves, enabling them to lead with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Bronwyn's personalized programs inspire her clients to harness opportunities, dissolve limiting beliefs, and align with their deepest aspirations, all while fostering resilience and balance in the fast-paced world of leadership. Bronwyn, welcome to the show today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Bronwyn, you've spent over 2 decades honoring your skills as an intuitive healer, energy worker,
Mhm.
and coach. Can you share a bit about your personal journey and what inspired you to step into this kind of work?
Yeah, sure. I think it's probably fair to say that for many people, when they have such a significant opening in their world, it tends to come from a trigger. So for me, it was an opportunity, a time. And admittedly, it was. I was only actually talking to someone about this yesterday. It was part of Saturn return. So when every 29 years, that comes around, and it can be a time where people they may change careers, they may get married, they may have babies, so they may get divorces or change jobs or whatever they do. So it was that time in my life, firstly, but also it came as an opportunity both to heal some of my childhood stuff, but it came as a gift for other people. So I had an experience where I felt that I was actually going to get pregnant and I wasn't ready to get pregnant. And so I had gone to work with some other healers and energy workers to go, okay, what do I need to do to finalize and anchor this? So I didn't want to do that. And as it turned out, the person I went to see said, look, I can't help you. And he forwarded me to a beautiful spiritual healer who gave me a very ritualistic practice to go through to clear the energy that was trying to come in through me. And when I finished that practice, it seemed very woo-woo at the time. And I kind of was a little bit nervous and, because I hadn't done anything like that before. And so I just chose to trust that I was meant to do this. So as I completed that, this energy just poured in through my body. And I knew that I had to give it to a particular woman. And this woman was not well known to me. She was a friend of my flatmates at the time. And, I just thought I would see her the next day and I could do exactly what I'd intuited to do, which was to put my hands on her shoulders and that energy would just flow from me to her with grace, with ease. It'd just be done. Anyway, as time kind of went on, that I didn't meet her. She didn't turn up to the lunch we were meant to go to. And as time went on and the days passed, I was really getting drawn into this constant message of give this energy away, give this energy away, give this energy away. And so ultimately, I sat a mutual friend down and said, "Look, I don't know this woman. I keep getting this message. I'm giving it to you. You pass it on to her." And so I sat this person down, gave this energy to her, and it just flew out of my body into her. We both felt it. We both leapt. And then it was this instant knowing within myself that this is what I was meant to do. And I knew that the whole reason I'd been given that energy was for a very specific purpose, but I didn't know what it was at the time. So it turned out years later when I actually spoke to this woman, because we became very good friends and we're still friends now, but it was a very difficult time in her life. And I had been sent that message to try and help her get through that. And as it turned out, as time had gone on, we kind of spent time together and that energy was able to be transmuted and transformed through to her life. But that was the trigger that started me on this journey of energy work and energy healing and starting to open up more intrinsically to my intuition. So once that had occurred, it was so significant to me that I had to rethink the plan I'd had for my life. At that stage, I was a director in the largest architectural practice in Sydney at the time. I had a lot of responsibility. I was very young. Had always been put in leadership roles, and I was in a very big mainstream business. And I just knew I had to make a change and I had to follow this intuition and this energy. So what I did is I stayed in my corporate job for maybe another 5 months or so, but I made plans to transition out of it so that I could actually follow this. I put an ad in the paper and said, this is what I do, not expecting people to call, but purely saying, all right, I've had this energy land and I'm willing to honor it. And as I did that, everything opened up. It just took me on journeys overseas to places where I learned a lot. I spent a lot of time on my own, a lot of time in meditation, a lot of time anchoring to the earth and really learning from the earth, learning from indigenous cultures in spirit, and really took the opportunity to embed the learning and to practice what I was being taught. And whilst a lot of that was to shift me energetically and to continue to elevate me and to expand my awareness and expand my knowledge, it was also for others. People would keep crossing my path and I'd keep sharing that wisdom that I'd been taught or shown. And as it unfolded, more and more people came. And, I just took that knowledge with me as I traversed the globe, doing whatever I was doing at the time. And that was really the start of the unfolding. And I think as time went on, I kind of thought that I would continue to stay exclusively in that space. I became a yoga teacher. I taught meditation. I've done yoga for many years, even before that experience had happened. And then I was doing my energy work and I sort of thought it would stay in that path. And then circumstances came around that guided me back into mainstream business. And I was sought out by somebody else and given the opportunity to embark on a role that I thought would be interesting, and it was timely in my life. And so I continued to run that spiritual work in parallel with the more mainstream business. And, I was never quite sure how it was all going to come back together, if it was ever going to come back together, because they were kind of running in parallel rather than being fully integrated. I mean, I definitely used my intuition a lot in my workplace, and I would make a lot of decisions and a lot of energetic shifts within the businesses that I worked in by just being there and doing work there. But the full integration, definitely took time, and it took a while until I probably was confident enough to really step into that powerful place of holding that intuitive space as well as holding a leadership space.
Yeah, I mean, like where to even begin with what you just described? First of all, can totally relate to what you were saying about the Saturn return.
Yeah.
I think for those people who are over 28, would know that that was probably a turning point. And it's incredible how significant Saturn returns are, because if you are paying attention,
Mm.
you can make it, and you are intuitively inclined, you can make that process really, really easy. I
Yep.
chose to go in a different direction and ignored everything my intuition was telling me. And it took me down a
Yeah.
road that was very, very challenging after that. But
Yep.
regardless, you get back on track. Whatever was meant to happen happens anyway. It might have delayed it a bit, but it does. But I love how you you just honored that time to go deep within, and you took
Mm.
time for deep meditation and uh,
Mm.
self-reflection. You traveled to gain more wisdom about what you needed to know.
Mm.
And I'm curious, from your perspective, do you feel like um, people who are getting closer to 28 and knowing their Saturn returns, or even the next one that they have, do you feel
Mm.
like uh, your recommendation would be to people to prepare for what's coming, so
Yeah.
that they have space? Because I was thinking while you were talking, like, not everyone has the opportunity to take a break from work to do that deep dive. I was able
Mm.
to a few years past that point, but I still did. I had 12 months off, and that was really good.
Yep.
But eh, do you think like it's worthwhile, like your recommendation, people taking that time to prepare so they can do that? Or do you
Yeah.
think that they can navigate even if they don't do that?
I think you can navigate even if you don't take that time off, but I think it depends how big a transition you've got to make into the energy that's truly aligned.
Yeah.
So mine sort of came because I'd had that awakening. My commitment to myself and to honor that was so great that it took me off in completely different directions that maybe 2 or 3 years before I wouldn't have even considered.
Yeah.
I've just spent 4 days with six 28-year-olds women, 28-year-old women, and really, really interesting because they were all very much wanting to have conversations about where they were at in their life, what was going on for them, where they should anchor their energy, what they should do. They were very open to their intuitive self and to talking about their intuition and to talking about how it relates in their world and how and none of them are doing the work that I'm doing. They are doing their own journeys, and they're all in different industries, from interior design to one was a lawyer, there was a PR person. Like they've got enough substance in their careers that they're all stepping either into management or into a more senior role.
Yeah.
So they're all at that transition, and every single one of them was looking at a change in some way. It didn't mean they would necessarily leave their industry or even leave their practice. Some of them were looking at new jobs that elevated them within their industry and within the business they're already in. Some were looking at complete changes. Some I could feel were struggling with whether they want to even work at all, that they're looking at motherhood or whatever. So I think it's there anyway. For me, the most important message that I was really sharing with them was that they need to trust their intuition, because they were all already alert and aware to the fact it was time for change. They all
Yeah.
knew it, every single one of them, but they hadn't actually had the conversation as a collective, nor had they had it with anyone else other than probably their partner and maybe one girlfriend. It was all just sitting there in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think the conversation that we ended up having, it was very interesting how it unfolded, because it started with one and then it was another one. And then all of them sat together, and every single one of them ended up having and engaging in a conversation which enabled them to see where the potential was and
Yeah.
where the opportunities were for them to grow and to shift. And I think because they've reached enough maturity and they've reached enough knowledge in their chosen field, they're really quite armed, ready to make that change anyway. The only time I think you need to take time off before or as that change hits is if you're absolutely smashed.
Yeah.
If you're in burnout, that's the time. But
Mm.
otherwise, the absolute shift and the transition will facilitate the downtime anyway, because even if they're moving jobs, they're going to take some time off in between. Even if they're going to have a baby, there's going to be some time away from the corporate world. Even if they're wanting to travel overseas, there's some time away in that transition, and it creates the opportunity for perception shift. And for me, that's the biggest thing, because that perception shift gives them the opportunity to expand their consciousness and to tap into a much broader frequency. And
Yeah.
that frequency gives them more opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, isn't it? I mean, what a beautiful thing to witness with those, those girls all together, those women who are without even realizing, consciously realizing, they're coming together as a group, as a gathering,
Mm,
as a little collective of females who are supporting each other. Like for them, it probably would have just been a random conversation, but it was what you witnessed was so much more than that. And the power of them coming together and sharing in that way in a circle,
mm,
which they wouldn't have even really realized, is
mm.
yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? I'm so interested in understanding how when you are in um, the Northern Territory, when you are connecting to the land, can you take me through and our audience through more about what happened there?
Sure. Well, for starters, I went back to the desert because I'd been in the desert in the States. So I'd been living in Sedona, Arizona. And if anyone knows about Sedona, Arizona, it's very well known for attracting people from all around the world because it's got amazing energy. It's high desert. So it's got red earth. It's very mountainous in certain areas. It's 2 hours south of the Grand Canyon. So it gives you some sort of idea. So It's red earth. It's got these massive rock outcrops, and it's known for energy vortexes that are present there. And those energy vortexes have the ability to open people up to new experiences. And so when I lived there, I'd had a lot of those experiences. And probably it's only now that we're having this conversation and I'm even looking back. And I used to do, even before I went to Sedona and before I went to the desert in Australia, I used to go into nature a lot to do my meditations. So, and I used to get a lot of intuitive information from the land and from energy pathways. I mean, in Australia, they talk about song lines, Aboriginal song lines, and I would be drawn to the energy lines of the earth. And when I would sit in them, I would receive information, which is kind of teaching you about the energy of the land and how it works. So when then I went to America, it was a similar thing. I just kept taking myself out into the middle of nowhere. I'd sit on these energy vortexes, or I'd walk up canyons and I'd find a place to sit that I was intuitively drawn to, and I would just tune in. And as I tuned in, I would receive information. And the information was, sometimes it was local, it was about that area, but often it was about human condition, or about the difference between black and white, light and dark. Sometimes people might use the words good and bad, but I don't really like that because it's got a whole layer of judgment to it. It's the energy of heaviness and lightness, and I would be shown and taken to places where they would share with me what the energy was about. I would be taken to sacred places energetically so that I could up-level my energy. And I always knew from the time that energy came in that my gift was here to share with others. I always knew that. But I had to do the learning and the embodying first.
Yeah.
So I had to have the experience, up-level myself, shift my vibration, shift any old trauma that there may have been from my past, learn to expand, learn to manage expansion, learn how to ground, learn how to clear, make sure that I could hold myself stable as I did those very expanded things. So the desert is an amazing place to do that. So I'd already been playing in the desert in Arizona. And then when I came back to Australia, I wasn't finished. I knew I needed to go back to the desert. So I literally just looked for work in the desert. And it took me out to Kings Canyon. And Kings Canyon has... it's an interesting place, black and white energy, light and dark energy sit very close together. So, it can challenge people. It really has. It's quite intense. It's a harsh environment. It's either really cold or really hot. And so I did exactly the same as I'd done before I went to America, while in America and while in the Northern Territory. I just would take myself out and sit in the bush. I used to walk for hours. So, and I was probably overconfident, I guess, in that I would just literally, I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I'd just go, okay, I feel drawn to that point over there. I'd just walk until I feel like I'd reached that destination. And then I would sit and I'd do a meditation, and I would receive information and receive energetic initiations, particularly in Kings Canyon. Well, it was everywhere actually, but in Kings Canyon, the initiation I received was actually a fertility initiation. And it was initiation into womanhood, if you like, so that I was ready to have a child. And so I didn't expect to get pregnant. I wasn't planning on it. And then I had a baby very soon after that period of time. So a lot of the things I learned were just by putting myself in a space where I was open to receive and open to learning energetically. And if something didn't feel right, trusting my intuition. And I had to spend a lot of time learning who I was, so I would recognize the difference between my energy and others. Because as an empath, and Mum used to joke that when I was little, she'd look down when I was tiny and I'd be mimicking the person in front of me. So the part of me that's the empath and the ability to absorb others energy, that's very strong in me. So I have to really know who I am to not take on other people's stuff and stay stuck in their stuff. So I guess, there was a lot of practice that came from putting myself in all those different places. And when you go out in nature and allow yourself to connect with the energies in nature, because it's not another human, it doesn't pull on you the same way. It's a different experience. And so it gives you the opportunity to allow yourself to open and allow yourself to trust where maybe you wouldn't do that with another human.
Yeah.
And that is something that was really quite essential for me. I looking back, I would never have said I didn't trust people. In fact, I would have said was very open and always willing to try new experiences. But sitting behind that was a lack of trust of humans and how they would treat me. And so by doing my energy work with the land, they taught me. They taught me what was safe. They taught me where there was energies rising, where energies were falling, where energies needed work, where things were clouded, where they needed clearing, where there was old energy from ancient cultures, where there was ability to elevate, ability to connect to spirit in various levels. So there was a lot of opportunity for learning because it wasn't tied to one human and it wasn't tied to one type of energetic. It was multidimensional because I went to different places.
Yeah, wow, that's so incredible. I mean, the fact that you had that understanding that there was a lack of trust there and that the earth was teaching you how to lean into that, how to heal those aspects, and how you could use that to your advantage is
Mm,
just, I mean, there's just no words for that. And I feel like that's a really big gift, I think, for people who do have trust issues. And I actually think all of us have trust issues to some degree because of the way the world is operating at the moment with corporations, people in power, all of those things, the way people are being abused, how we're treating ourselves, even how everyone's interacting. There is a lack of
yep.
trust, whether it's conscious or not. It is there. And
Mm,
what a beautiful gift as a reminder that spending time in nature is doing more than just grounding our energy. It's more
mm,
than just making ourselves feel good and calming our nervous systems down. It's actually doing something so much deeper than we even give it credit for. And I'm so
mm,
glad that I did ask you that question because I know you spend a lot of time with the earth and in nature, but it is so multi-pronged. And
mm,
I love that. Yes, you're definitely getting those energetic upgrades and your intuition was growing stronger, but it was also to teach you how to work with others, how to better communicate, how to feel into ways where you can protect yourself as well. And I think now, as we go into this year, I feel like it's like a really important thing for us to stop and pause at and to think about how we can spend more time in nature so that we can strengthen ourselves in that way in order for us to cope, because it is going to get more turbulent. Absolutely it is. And
mm.
I think
Yeah.
that is so valid. Like the times where, like, I live only a couple of streets back from the beach. I Sometimes it feels like an effort to go down there, even though that is my favorite place in the world. The beach is like my sacred place, especially in the area that I live. And I think, oh my God, what am I even doing? And it is trust of self, I feel like, and trust with others as well. That is one
Mm.
of the key components that I just haven't even recognized that that's what's happening there.
Mm, yeah, it's interesting because I used to think because that energy came in for me and I knew it was to be given to others. And when I would sit down at any place on the land, as soon as I opened up, if there was some work that had to be done on the land to support the earth, my energy would just go there. And so I'd always sort of seen it as a gift that I needed to action. I needed to give back to the earth, right? Um, but I know because I live in the hills, and so I've got, bushland near me. So it's a national park right near me. And when I go in there, if I've had a really challenging week and I've got a lot of energy just filtering through my field and I'm challenged by clearing it, the trees will clear it for me. They'll do it. I don't even have to ask, they just do it. And so but once they've done that, I always offer if there's anything, if there's anything that the earth needs. And the reality as humans is we all have the opportunity to be a channel.
Yep.
And so many people forget it. And we have the opportunity to open up and let that energy of love and kindness and gratitude flow through us and give it back to the earth. You know, the earth is very gracious in taking a lot of the challenges. You know, you go into any yoga class, and most people will say, you know, just send your energy down to the earth or let it yourself shed whatever you want to shed and let it drop into the earth, and the earth will take it and transmute it. But it's really nice when you can give back. And it's really nice when the earth just gives to you. And it gives to you via the trees, it gives to you by cleaning the air, it gives to you by holding space when you're feeling crappy and you lie on the ground. You know, it gives back. Just
Yep.
as we give to it, it gives to us.
It so does. And I think that's also an important point to make, because when you're change making, when you're in leadership roles, it is about being of service. But what about being of service to the earth?
Mm,
The very thing that is sustaining your energetic field and is helping you, taking that pause and that reflection to ask, is there anything I need to do? Is there anything I can do
mm,
to give back to the earth, rather than physical humans, or
mm.
physical action? It can just be just a straight conversation. And again, I think that's such a beautiful thing to reflect on, and something I think all of us need to be more considerate about, especially because the more we do that, the more change and transformation we're going to see across the world. So it has a
Absolutely.
ripple effect beyond anything that we can even fathom. And so just
Mm,
one small gesture, even just the question, it might be it's a no, no, nothing is needed, but it just one small
mm.
gesture is huge. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just love that. I really do. That's
And I
beautiful.
also think, you know, like the reality is that the Earth is evolving just as humanity is evolving. And
Yeah.
so as the Earth's electromagnetic field is shifting and changing and opening up, all of, well, not all of, but a lot of the old structures are shifting and changing.
Yeah.
And that's where the work that you do, the work that I do, the work that, you know, many others do to create new structures that enable people to grow and to morph into the new way of being, you know, the earth is facilitating that.
Yeah.
as there as the earth's electromagnetic grid shifts, so do we have to, because everything is impacted by that. So it means that some species have to shift and change and die off and other new ones come, but it's evolution. And I think, you know, it's very easy for humans to think things are going to stay the same or have to stay the same. But the reality is we're evolving. And I'm pretty sure you came, and I certainly came to help evolution. I consciously came in to evolve. I consciously came in to expand consciousness and to lift the vibration of the earth and the people on the earth. So that intention, the more of us that have the intention, the more of us that expand the frequency, the more of us that elevate, the easier, the smoother, the faster everything evolves. And the earth is on the same program. So
Yeah.
the earth is continuing to shift. And as it shifts, it's providing more and more opportunities for change. And it's fantastic because those people that every now and then get stuck, all humans, myself included, you know, the something will happen on the earth or in the environment, and it means we have to change.
Yeah.
It affects, you know, politics, it affects, you know, cultures, it affects all sorts of things, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I again, like, I just think it has so many benefits. We just needed that little reminder. So thank you. That is awesome. I just want to before I mean, I've got 7 billion questions loaded up in my head, but um, the initiations that were happening, can is there one that stands out to you that you want to share?
Um, Yeah, probably the one I'll talk about, the one that I mentioned before, which was the initiation. And I can only describe it like I've never had an Indigenous initiation in real life with other humans.
Yeah.
You know, so I can only I can only talk about my experience where um, I, I went to a particular place in the Northern Territory, which I knew was women's land. There's some places I would go and I knew I wasn't meant to be there, and I knew it was men's place. And so I tend to ask if I go into nature and it's a new place for me, I will ask if it's okay for me to be there. Like when I went to Catajuda, for example, it was men's land. I couldn't walk. Like there's this big pathway where all the tourists go, and I literally had to run out. It was just wrong for me to be there.
Yeah.
So, but this place in Kings Canyon was women's land. It's not a place that tourists can go. Like I literally just walked across the bush and went to this place. It was in a valley, in the rocks. I just sat. And I just do what I do when I turn up, and I just open up to meditate. And when I meditated, then the energy flows in. I felt myself being surrounded by women in spirit. So they're not in physical form, they're in spirit. And then there's a sort of mixture of a smell, like it's a plant. So it's like a clearing. It's like a clearing and a holding of space for me, and a set of language and chanting, which I can't tell you what the content was, except that I knew it was an initiation. And then I could feel this being drawn on my body, something that looks a bit like ovaries in a fallopian tube. So, it had two circles and it dipped down. And I could feel that being drawn on my body in the place where my ovaries would be and, where my uterus was. And I just knew I was being then held in this space, this sacred space where this energy was pouring into my body. And I knew it was a women's rite of passage. I didn't at the time know that it was a fertility rite. I didn't think of it like that. I just saw it as a women's rite of passage. I was 31 at the time. And so that energy ran through me, and it kept pulsing through me until I felt as though that initiation was done. And then when I was completed, like I was a long way from anywhere where other humans were. I was 4 hours walk away from any other humans. So Kings Canyon is not a big place. It's a little, tourist destination where there's a campground and some accommodation. And I was a long way from them. And I knew when it was complete that I would just get up and I'd walk back to where I was staying. But as I walked, I kept finding gifts left in the bush. Like I was literally having to make my way through the bush. There's no path. There's no, so I would find an eagle feather and I'd find a stick, or I'd find something that all had some level of significance for me as I walked back. So there were some very special birds up there that, there's the red-tailed black cockatoos up there and eagles up there. So feathers were left for me, and I knew in my body the initiation I'd received. And so it was more, rather than something physically happening to me, it was an embodiment. It was an embodiment of that energy. And I just knew that I'd received that gift. And then time went on, and, before too long, I was actually pregnant. But it was only then, I always knew it would have been a female initiation, And there's probably been other initiations at other times. I've found I've been taken into sacred places energetically, and sometimes I'll guide my clients into those places when I know it's right.
Yep.
And you receive an initiation either by light, energy, sound, or vision. A vision will appear. And those times and those places will invariably be an energetic upgrade, but they may also be an anchoring of a specific energy for you to be able to carry that forth to do the work that you're doing. And I find that very interesting, because the people that receive those energetic inputs are there to use them. And it's the right time and place. It doesn't happen. Those things don't happen unless you're ready. And it's just being open enough, willing enough to receive. And as those downloads occur, you can feel them land in your body. And you can feel them make a change to you that you're never the same again.
Yeah.
You're never the same again. And so for those of us who have had those experiences, they're so specific, and so there's such an honoring in it that it's really interesting that you asked me that question, because I actually don't share them very often, because there's a lot of skepticism out there. And because I am of the generation I am, when I first started receiving this stuff, you know, the work I do is known as spiritual healing, and there was a lot of, judgment around it. People in mainstream just like weren't, Reiki wasn't even a thing, you know. So there was a lot of people that were very thinking you'd kind of gone crazy if you talked about anything. So it meant that I kept a lot of my initiations, and now that we're talking about it, I can think over it, many, many, many initiations of different types, and people might wonder whether it's all indigenous. No, it's not. Sometimes it's from, certain other spiritual practices or disciplines, but I've never been attached to a doctrine. Yet I can have an initiation into an understanding about a spiritual practice from a particular representative, and that will give me a learning, and I will embody that. So those encounters, those experiences, I actually stopped talking about a lot of them, because it didn't do me any good, in the sense that people wanted to diffuse the potency of them. And they're such an incredible gift that I thought, there's no way I'm diffusing that stuff. So there was that. Plus also, I think that I wanted to harness that energy and embody it and really anchor it before I then, like I said, you channel. So I channel this stuff through me, through to whoever is to be the recipient. So in doing that, you've got to hold the energy of the original download. Yep. So it's like a blueprint. It's like a set of encoding. So every time I've received layers of encoding, there's a sacredness in that. And so I will hold space for people to share their sacred experiences if they want. And I'm very willing to share mine with others if they're willing to hold the same sacred space.
Yeah.
But I don't randomly talk about them.
No,
and it's not because I want to share.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect many people would ask you, but I feel like there's a deep trust between the two of us.
Absolutely.
This audience are very open to this kind of thing, and I don't feel like initiations are really spoken about enough. I've had many myself, not some. I think there's been a couple of initiations with other people facilitating, but most of them have been on my own.
Yep.
So I can relate to wanting to hold that frequency, that energy, let it cultivate, let it anchor in, and it is sacred. And you don't want to share really what has gone on, because it is sacred. But there's a time and a place, and I feel like for me to ask you, for me to feel inclined to ask you, it was time to share a story. It doesn't have to be all of them, but I feel like a lot of people in this community especially have been a bit isolated and haven't had someone to talk to about this. There's a lot of energetic healers out there, a lot of people who are doing Reiki, but I just don't think there's enough conversation about this in particular. And I feel like our energy and our frequency today is holding a container for more of that conversation. And I'm so grateful that you lent into my question and that you shared that. And I feel like it can be really isolating when you go through the initiation process, and each one has their own, blueprint and their own impact. But did you feel like a sense of isolation when you were going
absolutely.
through?
I mean, when I lived in Sedona is full of a lot of woo-woo people. So, I was lucky enough by then I'd had multiple initiations in various ways. And whilst I didn't discuss the details, I could definitely talk about a lot of spiritual things and it was quite normal. It attracts that community. But when I came back to Australia and went to live in the Northern Territory. I worked in a very normal job while I was doing all this spiritual stuff on the land. And so, they just would have thought I was a complete nut. And so I completely edited it. And even the work I did, like many of my clients, and certainly in early days, wouldn't necessarily tell other people that they would come and see me because of the concern about what people would think of them, because they were dealing with stuff that was spiritual and spiritual healing. And what does that mean? And, and people who know me well know I'm really grounded. They know I've got, a balanced perception on life, and, I'm not kind of completely crazy. And so, and so, and so, I would get all my work word of mouth. Like, I never advertised. All my work was word of mouth. I would just people flowing, people coming in. But to the point where I could go to any function anywhere, and in every situation there would be someone who was a client.
Yeah.
Right? But nobody knew that the others were my clients. And I got very good at not sharing anything. And so it's been a very interesting journey, particularly in the last couple of years, to shift that energetic back into talking about things, because the new generation of, healers and light workers are very open about their stuff, right? Because they haven't grown up through that experience. I'm a generation before them, and therefore I've had to negotiate my way through mainstream business whilst running this stuff in parallel. And so I had to learn to be very careful to be able to still do the stuff that I'm capable of doing in mainstream business without that being discredited.
Yeah.
And so now I'm at the point where I went, right, bang, let's bring it together, in a way that is really quite open. And I will be quite open publicly about how I feel, how I perceive things, what my intuition is saying. I will say, please trust me on something. If you don't understand why I'm asking you to trust me, you'll either trust me or you won't.
Yeah.
And because one of my things is integrity, and coming from a place of love and compassion. So, holding that space for myself and that depth of honesty, so that I can start to articulate exactly what we're talking about. Like, I would happily keep sharing, exactly as you talked about, these initiations, to leverage people and to let them step up into it, to hold space for people. I will guide people often in yoga sessions, into sacred space. And those that are ready to receive what they're going to receive will receive it in sacred space.
Yeah.
So yes, it's just a yoga class, and they just pay their normal yoga class fee. It ain't just a yoga class, And I love doing that. And I find it really interesting, the people who will contact me later and go, oh my God, this happened. I went, yeah, that's great. You got it.
Yeah.
Because then you're giving everyone the chance to up level. They don't have to change their whole frame of reference, but they're already there. They're ready. But they can't make the leap intellectually because it seems just too out there. So, but you can guide people through a visualization into something that they haven't otherwise anticipated.
Yes, absolutely. And it's because you have had those initiations, you're able to lead people through. And I feel like that's what happened for me as well. I didn't travel overseas, but I moved from Adelaide to Melbourne, and I needed space away from the people that, cared and loved for me deeply. A lot of them thought I was crazy, just, uprooting my life and starting somewhere again, like somewhere new again. But it opened up a lot of space for me to indulge in that self journey. And by accident, I found a book I'd been doing meditation classes. I'd learned how to read tarot. I did all these things, and had started to really dive more energetically. And I knew I had an Egyptian connection. I didn't quite understand at the time, but I found, randomly, this book, and I thought, okay, I'll just read it. And what it was, and to this day, I cannot find it online anywhere. It's like it just disappeared. It was like physically, and then it's just gone, completely gone. But each chapter was an initiation, and you
Yeah.
had to read and sort of go through it. And that I think it was like maybe a couple of weeks. It was so intense, and it was
Mm.
such a turning point for me because I felt like a part of me came alive and came
Mm.
online as a result of those initiations. But I never told anyone that I was doing that. I'd lock
Yeah.
myself, I was sharing a house at the time, and I'd lock myself in my room for hours. That my housemate must have thought I was like mental or something, I'm sure. But he must have thought I was crazy. He wasn't very spiritually inclined. I'd be saging the house and stuff when he was
Yeah.
out, but I'm sure he thought I was, out there. But what I was doing was out there, and I'd be meditating in the bath, and I'd be doing all of these, crying and releasing, and it was just so intense that even for me, I've never spoken about that out loud until now with you
Mm.
on
Yeah.
this, on this podcast. But it
Mm.
is again, I feel like there is a group of healers out there who are holding space because of the initiations. And this is coming in beautifully because I haven't thought about it until now. But the initiations are creating a space for this next level of awakening to happen. And
Yeah.
I look forward to hearing more about other people's
Mm.
initiations. I feel like it is safe to start speaking about it now. It wasn't really
Yeah.
the time or place to speak about it before. And I
Yeah.
think, more and more people are coming online spiritually, but initiations would still be a stretch for them to understand. But we are
Yeah.
we are holding the frequency and the space for them to meet, to up level to that now.
Yeah.
And um I don't know about you, but I refuse to not I refuse to do anything other than be in that space. Like I had
Mm.
someone recently say, "Oh, you're so brave using that language on your website because you're talking to CEOs and corporates." And I think, brave? Nah. This is where they need to match me here. I'm not diluting any of this frequency now. Like I want to see my thing is like creating a new paradigm for leadership. It is for the highest good of all. There's been so much softly, gentle here, do an art
Yep.
therapy class
Yep.
here, learn
Yep.
about this and learn about that. Nah, it is the band-aid is ripping off, and this is where you need to get used to this language. You need to get used to this. And eventually, I like to think, call it delusion, call it what you will, but I like to think that they will eventually get used to us saying about initiations. Like that's my
I
utopia.
will. And one of the things
Yeah.
that I think is really interesting, just on a humanity level, particularly in Western culture, we've lost the art of initiation. In every culture had initiation, right?
Yeah.
And both in the masculine and in the feminine. And it was a really important rite of passage. And when my boys, because I've got three kids, I've got a daughter and two sons. So when my sons were going into teenagehood, um, like they needed to go through initiation. Hang on, let me just change my audio. Yeah, so they really need to go through initiation, but it was so hard to find anywhere where they could be taken through initiation. And I had this bizarre experience. Have we got time to talk about another
Of
initiation?
course, please.
So most people would have thought I was a bit of an outrageous parent. My kids were exposed to every type of everything you can imagine, from more mainstream medicine through to very alternative spiritual healers, acupuncturists. They went to kinesiologists, they went to reflexology, but everything, right? And I used to trust my intuition. And every now and then I'd get this urgent need to go bush, right? And I was a single parent. I had three kids. My youngest one at the time was about 14, so 12, about 10, maybe 9. And so they were 2 years apart roughly. So my daughter was 14, and I just felt we needed to go camping, right? So I'd pack the kids in the car because I was working. They all had school. by the time we get home from school and work or whatever, I'm packing the car. It's winter, right? It's winter. So winter in South Australia gets down to about, sometimes it can go below zero, but, it was maybe about 2 or 3 overnight. So you have to kind of take enough bedding and a couple of tents and go home, shove everything in the car, get the food in the car, get the kids in the car. So by the time you get going, it's 5 o'clock, right? The night. So it's dark. It's getting dark. So we start driving down to the southeast of South Australia. I'm just following my nose. I don't have a map. I'm just trusting my intuition, driving. All the kids finally grizzle, complain. So we stop, get them a burger. That's fine. They get back in the car, keep driving. They all fall asleep and stop whinging. Excellent. So I can just follow my nose. So I'm going down the road. I'm going, okay, I need to go over here. And it's dark. There's no street lights. There's nothing. This is bushland. It's down past the Coorong, which is a nature reserve, big long nature reserve, a World Heritage listed reserve. Anyway, I get this calling to turn down this road, and I turn down this road and there's some sort of campground down there. So I drive in. Anyway, I can see some, not cars, but I can see some people around a campfire. So, okay. Drive, I park the car, hop out of the car. The kids wake up, get the 2 tents out, and then I realize I can only see men. I can only see Aboriginal men. So there's a single mum on her own, 3 kids, and my daughter is wearing this crop top, and she's very attractive, very petite, wearing a crop top. And I say, darling, can you please put some clothes on? There's only men here. I'm not doing that. Anyway, she keeps pushing back. Darling, can you please, because these men were all around us, and they came close to see who we were, right? So they weren't intimidating at all, but I didn't know who they were. And I'm trying to make sure my kids are okay. I've got kids going in different directions. My daughter's refusing to put more clothes on because it wouldn't have mattered any group of men that were there. I would have been asking her to do exactly the same thing. So she's resisting. I'm going, okay, right, what do I have to do here? Right, so I unpack the tent, start unpacking the tents, unpacking the car. One man comes over and says, would you like some help? And I go, oh, thank you very much, but no, it's okay. Anyway, so I face the tent doors towards each other. So, because I don't know how many men are here, I just know there's only men. Yep. So I've got my little one in with me. I've got the 2 other ones in the other tent. Anyway, we get up in the morning and this lovely man comes up and says, look, you've actually arrived into a men's camp, an Aboriginal men's camp. We're doing some group work. And I said, oh, look, I'm so sorry. I'll leave. He said, no. Can you be our guest? And I went, sure. He said, have your breakfast and come and join us at the fire. So my kids and I go over to the fire and they're telling stories, and one guy's playing guitar. And I said, okay, that's fine. We have a little bit of a catch up. And then I take my kids off and we go down to the Coorong, and there's some kayaks there. And so the kids and I, it's cold, it's wintry, it's cold. So we hop in the kayaks because the kids need to burn off some energy. And so we're paddling, it's against the wind, it's hard. Anyway, we travel across the Coorong because the Coorong's got salt water, and then there's another sort of spit of sand. And as we're crossing the Coorong, suddenly these men appear in canoes, and they shepherd us to the other part of the land, over the water to the other part of the land. And my kids get out, and these men just scoop them up into their care. They start teaching them about the Indigenous name for the plants and the animals. We walk over the hill of the Coorong. So the Coorong is this spit of sand dunes, and on the other side is open Southern Ocean. So it's big ocean. So it's winter, it's rough. So we walk over the sand dunes, and these beautiful men are accompanying us, and we get to the other side, and they're still talking to the kids about names for things and, talking to me about life. And we get there, and my kids decide they want to go swimming. Like, it's rough, Southern Ocean. I'm not going to get in, because if I go in, I know I can't rescue them. So I'm saying, no. I don't have enough strength. These men are so beautiful. They say, no, we'll take the kids in. They take the kids in. I stand on the shore because there's no surf lifesavers. There's no phone. There's nowhere to get help. These men shepherded them into the water so the boys could do their diving and their swimming and their body surfing, and they look after them, and they bring us back. The kids come back. We go back over the sand dunes, back into the canoes, back to the mainland. That's fine. We go off to our tents. They go off to do things. And then one of the elders comes over and says, will you come and join us for dinner? They've organised dinner. There's a hut in this place. So we go and join them for dinner. And we walk in. The elder comes and greets us and introduces us to all the elders of the group that were there. And then he says, the food's ready. And normally, as a mother in my modern world, I would let my kids eat first, right? I'd let them serve and then I'd focus on my needs. This elder was so beautiful. This is an initiation for my kids. He said, no, you wait. Your mother goes first as a guest, then the elders, then by hierarchy through the community, and then you. And it was like, oh my God, I could never have taught my children that, right? Because it was someone outside our family showing them a different way. And these beautiful men sat and chatted with us again. And when we finished our meal, they took us out to the fire. We sat with them in the evening. And my daughter wanted to go. There was a couple of young teenage boys, similar age to my daughter, who wanted to go off for a walk. And my daughter's very adventurous and she's a medicine woman in her own right. And I want to go walking. And I go, okay. And these elders were not comfortable with her not being chaperoned. So they said to their young men, you can go, but only a short distance. So off they went. I knew Rachel would be fine because she's a strong woman and I knew she was energetically okay. I knew these men were safe. I knew the young boys were safe. I was not worried about her. We sat around the fire with my younger sons and they were playing music again. And it was dark, it was dark by this stage. And the elders were getting really uncomfortable. And I knew intuitively that they weren't happy that they'd been gone too long. It had been half an hour. And they were getting really fidgety. And they said, look, I think we need to go get them. I said, look, I'm okay. I know she's fine. Anyway, they sat a little bit longer and they got more fidgety. We need to go. And I'm going, but she's okay. Finally, they said, no, we're going. And so they got up. And so I got up to walk with them. And as we left the fire, it's pitch black as we walk away from the fire. We turned down this rough track. And I'm not kidding. 20 men appeared from I don't know where. I'd never seen them. They shepherded us down this pathway to find my daughter and these young boys. And when we got maybe only, 5 minutes down the track and we could hear them coming back. But as they came back, my daughter came into me and I'm trying to say to her, this has been a dishonoring of the energy that they have provided us with. But I'm trying to say it without being, exposing her. But I could feel these elders gathering their young men like, this is not okay. They gathered them, and as we turned back, once they knew Rachel was safe, the men who had joined us on this track just disappeared. They disappeared. I don't know where they went. They just disappeared into the bush. We then went back to sit by the fire, wrapped up our evening. Anyway, we were going the next day because it was Sunday. I had to go back and take my kids home. So I'd said my thank yous in the evening, thinking we'd pack up early and be gone. We packed up our tent in the morning. Cars sorted, kids are loaded in. The elder came over and just sort of acknowledged us going. And then as I got into the car, I turned around and all these men lined the road to exit. It was the most humbling, it makes me want to cry now. It was the most humbling experience. They were just amazing. And it was an initiation for my kids that I could never have given them.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
I mean, that's an incredible gift for your kids to receive and for you to witness that for them as well. But to have that masculine, like for me, the standout in there is that's the divine masculine support that you
absolutely.
received, that your boys received, that your daughter received, that you received, being revered in that way because you were a guest. So they honored the feminine in you by by saying, no, you eat first. And then, even that, there's just a million different components to the story that you just told, but that initiation, it was so multi-pronged for your family. All of you received an initiation.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
That's just incredible.
Yeah. So I think initiations can take many forms.
Yeah.
They don't have to be just in spirit form. They don't have to be just in physical form. They don't have to be on the surface of the earth. They can be in the inside of the earth. They can be in outer space,
For sure.
they can be in the cosmos. So, we receive those initiations in many different ways. And, One of the things that I think is missing significantly in our Western culture is the rite of passage. And, my boy's got a taste of that. I know it's not a full initiation, but the taste of it, the physical challenge in the water, the initiation to the honoring the land, the names for the plants, the honoring your mother, the looking after your sister, all of that ritual that went into that,
Yeah.
without actually saying this is a rite of passage, without actually saying you are being called to account, you are being held to account. It wasn't,
Yeah.
nobody said that. It just was.
Yeah. But imagine a world where young men are being led through that rite of passage in that way. Like imagine the
Yeah.
kind of world we would live in, what kind of men we would be surrounded by if that was just the norm.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some I've interviewed and know that there are some really great men's um, work out there. There are
Absolutely.
some
Yeah.
of the men that I've interviewed who are holding space for other men to go through a rite of
Yeah.
passage now as full grown adults. But imagine like teen boys going
Mm,
through that, especially
mm,
those whose fathers may be absent as well. Like how
mhm,
significant that is.
mm,
Imagine the just for a minute, like just imagine the world, how different that would be, how it would force the feminine to soften, because we're seeing, and I'm interested in your opinion about this, the stuff around feminism. That I feel like, and I was even reading about this morning. No wonder it sort of stood out to me because I feel like I need to draw it into this conversation. But there is hatred for men wrapped in the
yeah, which is
feminism movement,
not
right? It
okay.
is it is basically
Yeah.
we hate men. But what you've just described in the world that we were sort of just letting ourselves indulge in, that isn't hatred for men. There is no
No.
hatred in there, and there is a deep trust in there with men as
Mm.
well. And I'm interested in your perspective. Do you see that, like in your mind's eye, do you see that that's possible? Like there is that a forced feminine softening is coming?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's being led, I think it's being led by women and it's going to be led by men. I think it's a bit like the readdressing of the balance back into the healthy feminine and healthy masculine. Both sides need to do the work. And there, like you said, there's some people doing some amazing stuff around this. I've seen some incredible stuff online. There's some people that I follow who are doing a lot of this work, trying to get people to see when you are out of balance in the feminine or out of balance in the masculine. And for me, someone who is putting men down as a collective, that is not a healthy feminine.
Yeah,
It's not a healthy feminine energy. It's
yeah,
actually it's actually an unhealthy feminine act masquerading in masculine aggression. It's just not the way to be. But that's my perception. For them, they may see that they have to be that strong to be able to get their point across. But I think if we one of my learnings in the last year has been this saying, which is just no. And just no is about holding the space of a boundary without aggression.
yeah,
And if women can get to the point of just no without aggression, that's empowered feminine. If they're having to put down somebody else to achieve it, then it's disempowered. Yeah. I understand that there's a journey from one extreme to the other. I understand when there's been oppression, there often has to be a pushback, and that pushback has to be quite significant to achieve a change. I understand all that. But if we were all to receive and achieve equilibrium, then we would have to stand in both our healthy aspects in feminine and women and feminine and masculine energy.
yeah,
Because if we don't do that, we're going to keep pushing and shoving each other all over the place.
yeah. I agree, and I feel like, and I've spoken about this on the show before, but we there needed to be that radical feminine movement, and I get that all makes sense. But now the pendulum needs to come back into the center now, because we went from one extreme to another, and I think everyone, I feel especially men, are confused. They're confused as to how to hold their energy.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of distortion around what personal power is, how they're using their power to manipulate. There is still, it is still, um, you know, just it's still very blurry. It still feels very dirty. The water feels very murky still, but eventually, I feel like the feminine is, it can there's like a new version of what being powerful in the feminine is. And I feel like for those, and this is like so beautifully linked. God, I love this. Those who have been through the initiations, one or many, understand what that feels like, what it really feels like. And I feel like those people are actively working to hold the frequency of that space for whether they're masculine or feminine. I feel like they're holding that frequency for that movement. Is that the feeling that you're getting as well?
Yeah.
Like, is this
Yeah,
resonating with
definitely.
you? Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think that there are some people that naturally hold that space in a more centered fashion anyway.
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah.
came in with, they were, born in with a certain personality that was more in the midline. Yeah.
Yeah.
For those of us who are more extreme, more outspoken, more forthright, often, certainly as women, we had to be more harsh to kind of be in our leadership, right?
Yeah.
Certainly in the early days, particularly, I was only just talking about this yesterday. We're in a very different time now, but scarily, there's still some really shitty things happening. I was speaking to this beautiful young woman yesterday, and the stuff she's experiencing is exactly as bad or worse as what we were experiencing back in the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah.
And I think, how is that possible? But I think it's happening because people can feel the change and they're frightened of it because it's change. And they don't, as you said, they don't know how to be. And so I think it takes good leaders, both masculine and feminine, to be able to hold the space so that those who are unsure know where to tread and how to shape themselves. And I particularly see this in business.
Yeah.
There's beautiful female leaders who, have to deal with bullying and, exclusion and all sorts of bad behavior because people around them feel threatened. I see men who get, forced into situations where they have to be more aggressive than they want to be because of people who are insecure and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, I think there's plenty of people out there. The more we talk about coming into our own personal power, and for me, that's where, if we go full loop, that comes back into what are the grounding attributes of the individual. And if we are centered in our open heart, our love center, then we will know when we're out of alignment ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, you'll know when you're out of alignment. I know when I'm out of alignment. I guarantee you, every single person on the planet knows that. It's just whether they listen to it.
Yes. And that's the thing, because there's so much escapism going on. People are using alcohol, drugs, gambling, relationships, food, the gym, all of these different tools to escape, to run away. Literally,
Mm.
people I know, in talking to friends, they've got family members who are literally running to the point where their body just can't take anymore to escape what that feeling is. And it
Yeah.
is sad. And I feel like there's an
Yeah.
undercurrent of real grief in
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
collective, like worldwide,
Yeah.
globally. I feel like there's a grief because of that. They
Yeah.
are grieving, and they don't even realize that they're grieving. Like it's
Yeah. I
it's like
completely agree with you.
completely unconscious. They think
Yeah.
everything is fine because on the outside it does. They look the part. They've got all the things. They've got the family. They've got the partner. The blah blah blahs and the blah blah blahs. But they're grieving,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
is, and sometimes it leaks out in their behavior. Like they act out in a way that's
Yeah.
just, it's kind of easy to be a bit judgmental because you can see that there's a severity in the way that they're behaving, and you wish that they
Yeah.
wouldn't because they're impacting other people. But
Yeah.
But underneath it, really what it is grief.
Yeah. And that's why for me, like connection is so essential in the work we do.
Mm,
And the more we take people back into who they are themselves, so they can feel themselves and know what they're feeling emotionally, what they're feeling, mentally, how their body feels physically. When they start to connect with who they are and what they're experiencing, and they can feel when they shift out of their center or out of their personal power, that's when everything starts to shift and evolve. And
yeah.
for me, that's our job, is to take people to their center. And once they're in their center, they will make decisions and take actions in alignment with that. And when they do that, they're going to be good men, good women, good leaders.
Yeah. 100% agree. 100%
Yeah.
agree. Yeah. And it is exciting because it's going to be forced that way anyway. But the more willing people are to get into feel, I mean,
Mm.
you're a projector as well, which I just love, and that's why this conversation is so beautifully deep, with just deep in the ocean with it all. Um, the more people feel their feelings, for
Mm.
the longest time, I was one of those people. And I still have to challenge myself to feel things I don't want to feel a lot
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
time. My trauma doesn't like to feel any feelings of discomfort at all. But I actively coach myself through, because I know that's where the growth is. And I know what tools I need to do to get my nervous system regulating to process the feelings.
Mm.
But I was one of those people who was running. I was one of those people who was literally running. I was smashing myself at the gym. I was working like a maniac, and being terrorizing other people with my shenanigans. And I send love to that old version of me. She was doing the best that she could. She was trying to cope, but that's what the majority of people are doing. They're just coping.
Yeah.
They think
Yeah.
that they're living, but they're not
Yeah.
living. They're
Yeah.
not. They're
I
dead
saw,
on the inside.
yeah, I saw something today which reminded me, I have a program that I created quite a few years ago about self-love, and I remember this other practitioner saying to me, "Oh, everybody's got a self-love program," really dismissing it. And I really felt it was really important because, if you can't work out how to tap into self-love, and some people can't because they haven't done it, if you can't work it out and you don't put effort into it, it's really difficult to find that central alignment and therefore your personal power. It's a prerequisite to personal power.
Yeah.
And, it was when I was speaking to these young women yesterday, the ones that had already discovered self-love were going to be able to negotiate that journey of the Saturn return much more easily than those that haven't.
Yeah.
Because those that haven't yet are going to push themselves too hard. They're going to put themselves through the ringer as they try and make the decisions about what they're going to do or not do. And they'll have to be challenged much more so to be able to make the transitions they need to make. Whereas, if we're all engaged in self love and we hold that space not only for ourselves, we hold it for everybody else, it means when you go into those harsh environments, which I don't know about you, but I know certainly I'm in at times,
Yeah.
that those harsh environments, if you don't hold the space of your center and your personal power, then nobody else in the room is going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Thousand, thousand
that's the
percent.
thing.
Yeah.
When we're the space holders, it's critical that we do that. It's critical that we work on that energy of self-love, that we give ourselves the time, that we give ourselves the space, that we honor ourselves, that we do everything we can to move back into our center anytime we shift out of it, because we will shift out of it from time to
Yeah. Of
time,
course.
where we'll lose the thread. But coming back in as fast as we can so that we can stabilize ourselves and then stabilize everyone around us.
Yeah, so true. And I mean, even when I think about the environments I'm going into with the corporates, the energy is very dense, very dense. And I feel like all. of what has happened for me in that learning around self-love, personal power, healing all of the trauma, all of those initiations. It was like training so I can hold
Yeah,
my energy in
yeah,
that space because I would have got eaten alive. I know that I've mentioned that to you before. I would have got eaten alive with this work. And there were a few times I came very close to jumping into this work, but I wasn't ready. And so the opportunity it was a no from the universe, but I could see I could see like everything has been leading to this, and it was just training, and I fully accept that and I surrender into that now. But I can hold that space. But to me, this because of the trauma that I've experienced, the self-love aspect still requires so much discipline. I have to be
yeah,
so
absolutely.
I have to be so disciplined with the self-love and self-care. If I don't
Yeah,
do that, the wheels fall right off.
yeah.
And
Some,
I still get tested. I still get tested
yeah,
left and right.
yeah, yeah,
I think it was last week. I derailed because I just was refusing to listen to my feelings, and it was a hard derail of
yeah,
one I did not need. If I had paused for half an hour, even an hour to do something to acknowledge it, I
yeah,
wouldn't have derailed. And
yeah.
it was a good quick lesson, a good turnaround for me to go, okay, we just can't do that again. Like
Mm,
there is a new information about what I needed came to light as well. So even that felt like a
mm,
bit of an initiation. But
yeah,
you're right, like there's one that, especially in large groups, family, we've just passed Christmas, though that can be incredibly challenging to navigate
yeah,
when you're out of alignment with your self-love and self-worth. But then when you're doing that as a change maker, to
mm,
do this work and to hold that frequency, to hold that space, to be in the expansiveness, that must be fundamentally the discipline. And
mm.
that anchor point then just makes everything so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think, as change makers and as leaders, we will be challenged possibly more than the others,
Yeah.
because part
Yeah.
of what we've got to do is develop the resilience. And,
Yeah.
this is the thing I noticed probably more than anything is the lack of resilience in across the board.
Yeah.
People unable to manage the array of information, the array of energy, the dialogue out there in all sorts of levels. And because they don't have the resilience to handle it, they get pushed out of their center really easily because they haven't spent enough time focusing on that aspect of themselves
Yeah.
to be really confident in who they are. Because once you're confident in who you are, you have the strength to say no and you have the strength to say yes and to mean each one at the appropriate time. And then you're not pushed around so much by everybody else's agendas, even when you've got a lot of aggression in or dense energy, as you say, in a space, and I think when people are not getting things the way they want, often they'll move to aggression in a business environment. And, you know, it can be very, very unpleasant. And that move to aggression, it takes a certain resilience. It's a bit like all these people that are bombarded with horrible stuff on social media. It takes a certain resilience to be able to stay in that space and not let it get to you,
Yeah.
because if you really want to make change and you want to elevate people, you have to acknowledge that there's going to be the haters out there, and they're going to do their best to throw you off course because it serves their small interest rather than the bigger interest, which is the elevation of the whole. And for me, that is the bit that I think is really important. If people, when they feel as though they're being put under pressure, that they tap into who they are and they do those self-love practices that work for them, and they honor themselves and they choose to step up and to step into the higher vibration and not buy into the drama created by the people who are trying to make things smaller and less. And they keep holding that space and they build their resilience around it. Then they become practiced in the art of knowing who they are and their core. And that is such an amazing gift. And not everybody is born with that, or they have it knocked out of them when they're young. The majority of us try and conform and fit within our, family and social environments so that we are accepted.
Yeah.
And that is necessary as part of a community, but we've got to find our own alignment, because if we don't find our own alignment, then we're going to be stuck no matter what we do, no matter which area of life we're in, whether that's our intimate relationships, our family relationships, our business relationships, our community relationships. We will be pushed from pillar to post. So understanding our truth of who we are is so vital to our happiness. And, we were talking, before we started this podcast about fun and laughter and love and joy. It's really hard to have those things if you don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And even if someone errs to the heavier side or more intense side of conversation and they're not naturally light, if they're in their center, there's going to be an ease and therefore a joyfulness that comes with that. And it's an essential part of us stepping into these new frequencies. If we want to hold this energetic shift that's happening on the planet, and we want to be the big, bright, shining stars we all want to be, then we have to know who we are at our core.
Absolutely. So true. And that comment that you made about if there are all, like on social media and stuff, there are people who are, not going to like what you've got to say, and they're coming at it from their perspective. I remember doing this course with Dr. Martini, and it has stayed with me like all of these years later. But he says, as many people who love you, there's as many people who hate you or don't like you.
Yep.
And he goes, that's just the harsh reality. And so
Yeah.
there's a particular technique he gets you to do, so that you can actually see, like on this, like two scales, that actually is the case. And
Yeah.
so approaching, I think it's really important for change makers in particular, I should say, that they are already okay in that space. Like they are already surrendered to. They're going to be people who are going to throw you off. But for people who are coming through, wanting to be change makers, who are already or are wanting to grow as a change maker and have a bigger impact, which means more visibility. I think it's a really important thing to remember that everything, whether you're conscious of it or not, everything is in a balance. So you might think, oh, he was, even one of the techniques was, for every good thing that happens, there's a lot of shit that happens as well. And so it's really important to stay neutral. And it's not about not experiencing the elation of, that all the good things, or not celebrating and all of that. It's not being numb, but it's actually being grounded in that middle ground, in that anchor point, so that you're not thrown off. You're not thrown,
Yeah.
like a pinball machine going left and right. You are
Yeah.
stable. And that also comes from that self-worth and that self-love. And the
Yeah.
more you spend time cultivating and staying disciplined in that way, the stronger you are. And you are going to get people, one of my favorite sayings at the moment is fuck around and find out. That's my absolute favorite. It's like my go-to moving ahead. People are going to do what they're going to do, but they're going to find out anyway. But you've got to know you. You've got to know
Yeah.
where your integrity is. You've got to know where your truth is. You've got to know. Otherwise, you are going to continue to face challenge after challenge. And the universe will test you anyway, just to make sure you're ready to going into another expansion of and frequency and more impact and more and more and more as you go. But yeah, you're going to find people who are challenged, but again, that comes full circle back to what we were talking about before. They're scared of change, and
Yeah.
that's all that it is.
Yeah.
They don't know what that world looks like. They're confused by that. They're terrified to let go of the things, the physical, especially the physical things that they're holding on to. But you know, change happens whether you want it to or not. And when you're going through a Saturn return, for example, you're so right. If you're not in that self-worth and self-love, I was not, very far from. That tank was in the minus. It wasn't even like 1 out of 10. I was like minus 3,000, I would say. And so I had a very rough time.
Mm.
And I'm grateful because I can help people even more now. And especially when you look at, and I'm interested in your perspective about this, like when you are working with leaders and you're working with corporates and you're in those spaces, do you agree that the big issue in those organizations is that the majority of people in those organizations don't know what self-love is, and they don't
Yep.
know what worth is? Like, you get people sprinkled in the mix. It's not everyone, but those
Yep.
people who are in their worth and self-love are having, I see from the experience that I've had, are having a tougher time of it than the ones who are not, like the
Yeah.
ones, like, I feel like the majority of people who are not in their self-worth are blending in more than the ones that are in their worth and in their self-love. Like, I
Yeah.
feel like those people are having a harder time. But the issue is, the reason they're having a harder time is because the majority is not in that same space.
Yeah. I also think that, we're still culturally, certainly in the West, still culturally in the trying to please our community,
Yeah.
please our parents, please our, social group, whatever. That is so strong for the majority of people that it has actually outweighed self-love.
Yeah.
Right. And I know it's the way, probably even the way I raise my children, even though, you like to think you're better than that, but probably I wasn't. You kind of, you need them to cooperate. So you kind of coerce them at times into certain things. And fortunately, I had a very strong-willed first child. And so she kind of broke a lot of that out of me. But, that's the reality of what happens when you're young. And so as you then go through, school and, university and first jobs, and most people are still either trying to please the boss, or they're trying to please their partner and bring home the money, or they're trying to get somewhere in their life that they think they should because that's the social conditioning. So all of that is about pleasing others, which means that they are looking at things outside of themselves, not within themselves.
Yep.
And so that just goes back to the self-love thing. You can't have self-love and please everybody else
Yeah.
and forget yourself. You have to look at yourself. And if you don't look at yourself, you don't then have the resilience to deal with judgment. And
Yeah.
the reality is, all those people that you're trying to please all have judgment, just as you and I do.
Yeah.
And I remember this beautiful woman once saying to me, when I was complaining about feeling judged about something, this is many, probably a couple of decades ago, she looked at me with just abject horror and she said, well, everybody judges everybody. And I went, oh, yeah, better get a handle on that one. So everybody judges everybody, whether you mean to or not. And it's just there because you've got all that patterning, all of that information, all of the belief systems. The more you choose to live in the light and in love, the less you're attached to some of those old paradigms. But the reality is those paradigms exist. Those paradigms shape the hologram that we create of our life.
Yeah.
And so the tighter we want to make that hologram, the more rigid we want to make it, the more rigid our beliefs and our patterns, the harder it is for us to engage in self-love. So the reality with self-love, if we're doing it, is it will be fluid. It will shift.
Yep.
And it will change because we have to honor the different ages and stages that we are, the different places and times we're in. And we need to pull all aspects of ourselves. So some people call it the shadow aspects of themselves. Those shadow aspects have to come into being loved too. Because if we don't love those aspects, when you get into a business and leadership space, all the buttons that will get pushed are all around the shadow aspects, and they will rear their head. And if we don't learn how to love those aspects of ourselves and be okay in that vulnerability, then we'll continually push that energy outwards and try and turn it into blame or see ourselves as the victim. And if we don't step out of victimhood and step out of blame, it just pushes the energy in a very harsh way out and around. And again, we're not dealing with self-love, because if you're in your center and you're coming from a place of love, you're not going to blame your neighbor. You won't do it
Yeah.
because you'll go, right, I can see there's something happening here, but they're on a learning journey. And what we need to do is articulate our boundaries as an energy of self-love and recognize where that boundary should be in regards to that person's behavior. But it's not our job to punish them
Yeah.
and to drive them into the ground and be vile towards them. So for me, it all starts with us being aligned to our center and really connecting back into knowing who we are. And it's a really interesting, it takes time, and I know there's been times in my life where I've had to spend a lot of time doing that. You asked that question at the beginning about, do you need time at Saturn return?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do need time, but you can do it in amongst other things. I know when my children were fully grown and they all, reached adulthood, I had to go, well, who am I? Not just a mother. Who am I? What are the things I really like to do? It took me 6 months to work out what was my fun.
Yeah.
Because part of my fun had been tied up in family and doing things for them. But really, what did I want to do? Where did that sit for me? What was self-love for me? I'd given a lot of my energy to raising my family with absolute love and openness, and I wanted to do that. But in that journey, I hadn't always upheld my own self-love. And so, you do go through waves of it. And the more demanded you are, whether that's at home or at work, and whether you're caring for other people or not, that all is interwoven in whether or not you can actually care for yourself.
Yeah.
And making time to look after yourself becomes critical.
Absolutely. And that's why everything for me is heart led change makers, heart led leadership, heart led everything,
Yeah.
because it does come down fundamentally. The bottom piece of it all is you've got to be in your heart space. In order to be in your heart space, you need to give yourself to truly be in your heart space. You need to give yourself that self-love. You have to go into the feelings, all of the feelings, the good, the
Yeah.
bad, the ugly, whatever it is, and own it. Because a lot of these leaders who are choosing not to be in that space, and it is a choice, are carrying, and this is, again, why both of our work is so important. The guilt and the shame that they're carrying, that they don't even realize, is
Mm.
eating their insides. It is eating their insides so
Yep.
severely that
Yep.
I feel sad for them. I can see the sadness. I can feel it. You can as well. And
Mm.
it is the thing that really powers and motivates me to keep on with this work, to keep talking about why that is important. And I work in particular with the shadow aspect. I activate the heart opening, cracking it open. And it is done with love and compassion, obviously, but it is a bit of a challenge. It is a bit Saturn return flavored, but for the highest good of all, for them,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm not challenging people into that space to hurt them or to harm them.
Yeah.
Same for you. It is so that they can feel joy, what real joy is. They can feel the freedom to be in that love in their heart, for their soul to feel some respite and peace, to release the grief that they are carrying. And the leaders, especially the ones in the big large corporates who and the ones in who hold a lot of power, need to do this so fundamentally for our world to change. that
Mm.
but the more we're doing that at an individual level, at a local level, family level, community level, whatever level, that will start to expand out. And that's another reason why both of us are now in that space where we're not bending, we're not diluting the language, the work that we're doing. It is no,
Mm.
we're gonna just journey gently over here. Just follow this path. Don't worry about what's gonna happen. Don't worry about it. It's all good. Don't worry. We got this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're holding those spaces and we're holding those
Yeah.
containers. And it is, I feel like, the work that you're doing is like there is such a beautiful gift in not just how you're facilitating that transformation with leaders, but also in how you're creating that energetic expansion. And I love and adore that about you. I really do. I haven't said that to you directly, but I do. And I see you, I see that work, and it is, as an intuitive and an empath, it can be challenging, especially when, like we were saying, the energy is dense. But it's only because of the work that you have done that you can do this work. And it's beyond. I mean, there's a lot of, this is one of my other bugbears. There's a lot of people that talk the talk about being spiritual and doing the healing, and they use all the spiritual language because it sounds cool. But you have done the core work to hold this space. You've done the core work for transformation. You have done the core work so that people can expand their energetic field and lean into it. And it's safe. It is not it's not chaos creating, right? A
Yeah.
lot of a
Right.
lot of uh healers out there and people in that sort of and I'll use inverted commas spiritual leadership space. They don't really know what they're doing. They're opening energy up, but there's no safe container. They haven't done they've done lots of leadership work, but not the spiritual, right?
Mm.
Whereas I came into it loads of spirit, like loads of leadership skills, and then I learned all the spiritual. But that's been the last, what, 15, 16, 17 years of
Yeah.
that work deep in it, deep,
Mm.
deep, and uh, you know, I know what that deep work feels like, so I can recognize it
Mm.
in others, and I'm sure it's the same for you. You know
Yeah.
when it's deep, but you are holding such a safe space for people to, even in conversation with you. We've had, we catch up outside of the podcast and whatever else, and every time I feel like you expand the energy out, and it's like I swell in energetically, swell into the space, and I'm like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, ah, I'm stretching. I feel like
Yeah.
like my wings, if you will,
Yeah.
energetic wings stretch out, and I'm like, what have I been doing? I sometimes squash myself into spaces I'm not meant to be in, but every time it just gets all sort of wider and wider, and I don't I I don't know of very many, if any, other people who are doing it like you. And
Mm.
I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Oh, thank you. But that is absolutely my intention, is to expand the energy so that everyone that I work with can expand their energy, and I'll hold that space for them. And if they choose not to take it, because that happens in
Yeah, of
business,
course.
right? So if they choose not to take it, that's their call. But I will hold that space, and I'll keep expanding it so that they can keep expanding. They can expand their intuition. They can expand their vision. They can expand their beliefs. They can expand their patterns. They can shift and change so that they can step quickly into the new space.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
all of that legwork that we've done over the decades, it doesn't take as long now as it used to take then. So
yeah,
what used to take me, maybe, I don't know, I'm going to make something up, but let's say it took me 2 years to move through something. Now people can do it in 20 minutes. The energetics on the earth has changed.
yeah,
And my intention is to help people move through that stuff quickly, because
yeah,
the reality is we all have stuff.
yeah, yeah,
So our job is to shift the stuff out of the way so we can keep meeting our vision, and keep expanding and elevating our own frequency and the frequency of the planet,
yeah,
so that everybody steps into the light, everybody steps into grace, everybody steps into love.
yeah,
And I don't adhere to this notion that, the world's a disaster, the world's going to collapse, everything's bad. I don't adhere to that.
yeah,
And I think that if we as a humanity choose to step up and expand our frequency, we can make change really rapidly. And for me, it's about holding the space for people to do that. Even people that have no concept of spirituality, even people that have never even wanted to have a conversation about it, just by talking them through, as you would do, the issues that are there, you hold a space for them to expand into it. And those that are ready, it's like a deck of dominoes. It's just and they just move through that stuff really fast
yeah,
because the space is held for them to do it. And
yeah,
the people that hold the space have done their work to hold the space.
yeah.
So it's great. It's great that we're all here doing our bit.
Absolutely. And I like what I love about it the most is I can go even deeper into conversations with you, which I don't I've got I can count on one hand the people that I can do that with, and they just let me be a full weirdo alien, and I love that. But with you, I feel like you just follow me where I'm going. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's like this beautiful flow, and like I said, I feel like I'm activating like so many things just in playful conversation, like without even
yeah,
realizing. But I can feel my frequency, and
yeah,
yeah, it's just really incredible. 2025, it's a year where the energy is faster, definitely going to be faster. So
yep.
people are
Already
going to be
started.
activating and changing,
Yep.
definitely. But as we look forward, what is the vision or the message that you have for our audience? What would you say they need to most understand collectively about what is coming through?
Yeah. So everyone came in with a set of encoding that was for their highest good. It's set in their energy field. And all they have to do to step into it is set their intention. So intention is everything. I know this has been proven over and over again energetically and quantum physics, etc. But if they set their intention to tap into their highest vibrational encoding, it will start a release where that encoding, it's like it turns on. It's like the lights turn on in the house.
Yep.
And they may not even know what they've triggered just by setting that encoding in place. And as that encoding lights up, it's like all the little fairy lights come on.
Yep.
And then what happens is that the human being that we are inside that energetic coding starts to go, oh, the lights are turned on. I've actually got to activate something here. And so our whole energy system starts to shift and change. It's going, I can feel something's different. I can feel something's different. I don't know what, something's different. And then what will happen is as their intellect and their physical body and their emotional body start to respond to these energetic codes, there will be triggers that will be presented to them to elevate them. So those triggers might sometimes come as challenge. They might sometimes just come as pure expansion and new vibrational experiences. Sometimes they will come in the vision of them seeing visions and hearing things and opening to new sensations. A bit like these auroras that we're starting to see in the southern hemisphere that we didn't used to see in Australia, that they're now starting to be present in mainland Australia where they weren't before. It's like the frequency has opened up. People can see things and hear things and feel things that they couldn't before. So that encoding in everyone's field is there. So I would suggest to anyone who wants to elevate and elevate fast, acknowledge their encoding. They don't need to know what it says. They don't need to know the specifics of it, but they just need to ask for it to be activated for their highest good, as you like to use that term. It's great,
Yeah.
their highest level of encoding, so that encoding will trigger ultimately within them, within their energetic framework, the circumstances for them to activate and align quickly and rapidly. And it's going to happen fast. The faster they intend it, the faster it will come.
Yep.
So if they need to put the brakes on that because they feel it's overwhelming, all they need to do is say, please deliver that in timing that works for me.
Yep.
So just because they can't see it doesn't mean they don't have governance over their own energy. They are still the master of their destiny. It's not like some greater set of beings is going to make them do something. It's their choice. They brought that encoding in with them.
Yep.
Every single living being brought in a set of encoding, irrespective of whether they're a plant, an animal, a human. They brought encoding in with them, and they can activate that encoding. So humans have this ability to be able to go, I have an intention. My intention is this, is to activate my highest level encoding. And therefore I can run my life from the energetics that are most beneficial for me and for this time on the earth.
Oh, I mean, that is juicy. I love that so much. What a beautiful gift for our audience to receive, and such an excellent reminder. We're at the beginning of the year. This is like such a beautiful way to set such a significant intention and to lean into it, to step into it. And you're right, everyone's got free will. And when you start to feel overwhelmed, you can say, I need you to just ease it off a bit, give me some time. That's fine as well. But wow, that is magic, absolute magic. Oh, you're such a little gem. Um,
Like you. Ah,
Bronwyn, as you know, we could talk for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and go into multiple timelines many times over. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It has been an absolute pleasure. I will have you back again. We've got so much more to unpack and discuss, but I loved our conversation, especially the stuff around initiation and self-love. Though I mean that has just brought so much love into my heart, but I feel like that's the frequency of this podcast, and I appreciate you.
beautiful. Thank you. It's been so lovely to have these conversations and to be able to speak so openly about all this stuff. It's great. And, to just feel it. I can feel the energy go through, even as we talked about that encoding, I can feel it being channeled through everyone's encoding so that everything we've talked about will go through that encoding and trigger it even more.
Yes, so good. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.